welcome Dr. Vipul Rai Rathod.
Thank you very much, respected Chairperson Dr. Joshi. I would like to convey my sincere thanks to Mahim Dharavi Medical Practitioners Association to have given us this platform to share our experience in endoscopy. Can I have all the lights down? All the lights down of the hall. So the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through the journey of what is the current status, how endoscopy has evolved, and I don't know what various different levels of endoscopy has evolved over the last 5 decades. But the most important invention happened in 1957. This changed the way we started practicing endoscopy. And I must share that this gentleman, Basil Hershowitz, the professor, is emeritus in the United States in Alabama. We were very fortunate, myself and Dr. Nageshwar Reddy from Hyderabad, we were invited. This is the man who invented the first flexible endoscope in the world in 57. So Nagi always had been representing India for ERCP from Hyderabad, and I was always fortunate to represent India for endosonography all over the world, over more than 50 countries now. So it was amazing experience when we interacted with Professor Basil Hershowitz, how he developed the first flexible endoscope, and it was very inspiring. Earlier endoscopes were fiber optic, and a lot of changes have happened, and another giant in our field, Professor Peter Cotton from United States, originally from UK, he invited me at the Medical University of South Carolina in the United States to give a talk on advances in pancreatic endoscopy in Asia. So it was a great privilege. But I would like to share with you my deepest sincere gratitude to my mentor, Professor Nip Suhendra. He's the first man in the world to put a stent in the bile duct endoscopically for obstructive jaundice. And I was extremely privileged to be with him for almost 2 years in Germany for fellowship in advanced endoscopy. So ladies and gentlemen, what diagnostic, can I have the lights down, a little lights down, dark, can we have dark room, it's okay. If they don't see me, it's fine, as long as they see the screen. So endoscopy allowed us to see all these things, and this is how we would see on endoscopy: strictures, ulcers, inflammation, cancers, tumors. But what really changed over the last almost 5 decades is high resolution endoscopy. This is whole high definition endoscopy we talk about, HDTV. This is HD endoscopy. So with HD endoscopy, you can pick up the minutest of the ulcerated area or abnormal mucosa in a flash, and this can really get us diagnosis of stage 1 cancer. Say for instance, this is a patient who was referred to us for dyspepsia, and you can see this is a narrowband imaging. Narrowband imaging is like a chromoendoscopy, where you change the bandwidth, and you can see this is the Barrett's mucosa. This is a squamocolumnar junction. That's better. I appreciate. Thank you. So we reverted the disease, obstructive disease here, by removing all the stones. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to highlight to all of you is that you can remove all these stones. I'll show you, these are the multiple stones removed. Look at the number of stones removed from the pancreatic duct. So endoscopic treatment of chronic pancreatitis have changed, and we need to understand that. I'm going to go to the last section of my talk today. We will have pancreatic pseudocyst drainage. Now, endoscopic drainage of pseudocyst is an established technique. Surgery, according to us, is completely out. So,
good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, thank you, Dr. Anthony, for such a kind introduction. At the very outset, I would like to thank the Mahim Dharavi Medical Practitioners Association, our President, Dr. Taure, Dr. Navketan Pednekar, Dr. Gokani, Dr. Toraskar, and all our stalwarts, Dr. Utture and Dr. Anil Pachnekar, for giving me this opportunity to talk. Today I'm going to talk on the joint replacements, new horizons. We all are aware of joint replacements. So what is it that we are now waiting for? What are the new things which are coming up? And at the very outset, like Dr. Rathod just delivered a lecture, it was a wonderful lecture. Let me congratulate him. It was a wonderful lecture. It was a great insight of what new things are happening, and we should be aware of what is happening, because otherwise we go by the conventional things. So why? Why something new, you know? These are the kind of patients that you're looking at. Now, if you look at this patient, and if this patient says that this is what I want after my knee replacement, the conventional knee replacement is not going to give what she's trying to do. So that's the reason, that's where we are trying to achieve something near normal to what the God has given to us. And that's where the new horizons come into picture. That's where we try to find what else can we do so that we get our patients much better than what they are today. So these are certain facts that which I'll get you through. I will give you a brief introduction about arthritis also, and then go on to the latest developments which are occurring in joint replacements. These are an astonishing figures which are there. 43 million people are suffering from arthritis all throughout the world, and to our knowledge, half of them are in India. So you can imagine the quantum of patients that you're looking at, and that's the reason why we need to get into more research and development in this field. Just to add to it, it's just the second disease after cough, cold and fever, you know, which is the commonest of the things that you get. So you can imagine the amount of money which has been poured in for such research and development. $82 billion. This is what you're looking at. $82 billion are been invested in this industry just for research and development. The other facts which are there are this, like nowadays we are seeing a lot of cancer patients. Now 1 in 3 above 60, that means 30% of the population above 60 would suffer from arthritis. And females are much more prone to arthritis as compared to males. So this is something which we need to keep into our mind, that, you know, these patients are the ones which are going to, come to us regularly. And why are we getting so many arthritic patients? Were we not having arthritis earlier? Or why? What are the factors that which are making patients more vulnerable for arthritis? The first thing is what we are trying to see here is that earlier we used to see arthritis after 60 years, and now we are getting this age lower. Now we are trying to see patients, or rather we are seeing patients who are having arthritis much more earlier, around 45, 50. So the demands are changing, the way the sporting activities are changing, lot many things are changing, and we are trying to see, we are seeing the patients at an earlier age. The activity has increased, so everyone wants to be active, everyone is into sporting activities, as I told you, everyone wants to be there. So demands again are changing in this. The life expectancy of the patients has increased. So because of our development in medicine, since the life expectancy increases, arthritis also we are trying to see more, because as the age advances, the wear and tear is going to be more, and you're going to have arthritis. Now, why new things have to be developed? Because now patients expect more out of you. Earlier with arthritis, we would say, okay, just take medications, it is with the age, it will be there with you, bear with the pain, this is going to be lifelong and nothing can be done about it. But now patient says, no, I can't live with pain, I need something whereby my pain goes off and my quality of life has to be better. And above all, the life expectancy of the implant. Because earlier when, let's say 15, 20 years, when joint replacement surgeries really started taking place in India, the life expectancy of the implant would probably be around 8 or 10 years. But now, because of the revolution, the life expectancy of the implant, what we are trying to put in, can be around 20 to 25 years also. So that's where the revolution is taking place. So these are the kind of arthritic patients that you'll be seeing it on a regular basis. I'm pretty sure you all are aware of it. We are not going to go in details about it. Osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, ankylosing spondylitis, Rickets, and gout. These are the cases which you commonly, routinely get. Probably these might be around 40-50% of your practice. Typical picture, what you're going to get about your osteoarthritis, and this is a typical gait that you are trying to see of an arthritic patient, the way they are trying to walk. Now what is exactly happening in arthritis is that the cartilage onto your inner side, that's so medial joint space reduces, the cartilage gets destroyed, and then the bone starts rubbing against each other, which gives rise to pain. These are just an X-rays to show you how it goes in different stages. This is probably a stage 1 where the joint space on both the sides is quite well maintained. And as you go on to the second slide, it starts reducing. Third, again it is reduced considerably. And fourth, the joint space is not there at all. So these are the kind of severe cases that you're trying to see. And these are the arthritic cases which actually needs joint replacement. And these are the cases which can be conserved. So today it doesn't mean that all arthritic patients need joint replacements. There are of course various other modalities which we'll come to. Typical X-ray again, just to show, just to add up to this, because these are the cases which you are going to get. This is the decrease in the joint space. If you see onto the other side, the joint space is maintained, and on this side, the bone is rubbing against each other. Okay, so this is a medial joint space reduction. These are the osteophytes that you are seeing, so extra bone which is getting formed. And these are the cysts which you would be seeing, the circular ones. They are the cysts which are there, which are pathognomonic for this arthritis. So these are the severe arthritic cases. Another X-ray. What you get in the knee, similar thing you get it in the hip also. So you can see that these are the cysts, joint space, the bone again rubbing against each other. If you see here, it's the spherical is quite well maintained. This joint space is very well maintained on all the sides. Here, the ball has come out and it is rubbing against the bone. Now, because I do a lot of arthroscopies, so this is a picture, this is an arthroscopic picture just to make you understand what is exactly happening to the cartilage inside. Now, this is a cartilage which is smooth, which is a normal cartilage that you're going to see. And this is a meniscus which you see. So probably many of your patients who have sports injuries might have undergone a meniscectomy or an ACL reconstruction which is there. Now, these are the cartilage which is normal, and if you see here, it's an arthroscopic image. When we do an arthroscopy, you can see that the cartilage is totally destroyed, and here they are like huge craters. This is actually the bone which is there, similar bone on the other side, and when these patients stand or walk, this bone will rub against each other and give rise to pain, crepitation. So a lot of times all of your patients will be saying some noise is coming, some cut noise is coming inside the joint. That's probably because this bone is rubbing against each other. So does it mean that all arthritic patients need joint replacement? No. All arthritic patients do not need joint replacement. It is only the severe cases, the stage 3 or the stage 4 that we were discussing, which require joint replacement. There are many modalities of treatment. What I always stress upon with all my patients is, number one is the weight loss. If you see all your arthritic patients, very rarely you will come across someone who is very thin and still having arthritis. Majority of the patient, 98% of the people would be obese to begin with. And that is precisely the reason why they have landed up into arthritis. So the first and foremost, when we get these patients at an earlier age, we ask them to do the weight loss, which is most important. And apart from that, there are certain lifestyle modifications. Only two things that we ask the patients not to do is to sit cross-legged and to use Indian commode, or rather Indian toilet, and use a commode. So if you avoid these two, like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or to use a commode rather than an Indian toilet, many of the patients will be comfortable, because these are the positions which will give rise to terrible pain, because these are extremes of positions which cannot be accommodated, and the patient experiences pain. Apart from this, there are many other things: medications, physiotherapy, exercises. Viscosupplementation is something again which I would talk upon. Lot of medications which are there in the market. The latest ones and the new ones which are being glucosamine, which is there for quite some time. So glucosamine is a food supplement. You have to understand one thing, and only in India it has been considered as a drug, but otherwise it's a food supplement. You can give glucosamine and chondroitin. The other is S-adenosylmethionine. Earlier this was the drug which was given to a lot of psychiatric patients, and this S-adenosylmethionine which is there, which is now easily and readily available, can take care of arthritic pain in many cases. The other thing which is the most important, when the patients are coming to us early, this is the kind of treatment that we give it to them. This is called as a viscosupplementation. It is a high molecular weight hyaluronic acid which is injected into the knee joint. It is like a synovial fluid. It replaces the synovial fluid. In arthritis, what happens is that the synovial fluid reduces, the joint becomes more dried up. And when you try to put this, it gives you a lot of relief and lubrication. It's like your engine. If your engine gets jammed, you put in an oil into it, and then you feel that the engine gets start going. Similarly, even in the knee, if you start injecting this, these are the ones which can give you a lot of relief in stage 1 and 2. And sometimes you also come across a lot of patients who are 85, 90, 95 who are reluctant for surgeries. These are the cases in which you can normally get a little bit of relief, if not 100%, by giving this viscosupplementation. Standard procedure of intra-articular injection given in sterile aseptic technique. And other modalities of treatment other than joint replacements are also available with us, including arthroscopy like we rightly described. And this still stands true, high tibial osteotomy. Sometimes we have 35, 40-year-old who come to us for knee pain. They have arthritis. At 35, 40, we do not do joint replacements unless and until really severe to the level that we need to do it. Because as I told you, the life expectancy of the implant, although has increased to 20, 25 years, if I try to do a joint replacement at 40, the person is going to require a revision knee replacement at 60. So normally the cutoff age for a joint replacement is around 60 years of age. So we always say try and pull on till 60, and if at 60 you have a lot of pain, we'll go ahead with a knee replacement. But there are cases where you have lot of pain, severe arthritis that they get bedridden, then in those are the cases we try to do a joint replacement early. Just add up to the rheumatoid arthritis, one of the most crippling diseases, and nowadays I'm seeing a lot of rheumatoid arthritic patients which are there. It is an early onset, and these are the cases where I was talking to you that at 30, 35 or 40 also we may have to do a joint replacement. These are the select few cases of rheumatoid arthritis that we do joint replacement early. So this is a typical picture of a rheumatoid arthritic knee. It's a knee which has been opened up and it's a lower end of the femur. And you can see this red thing which is there, it's actually the pannus. This is the pannus which goes on to the cartilage, and then this pannus which is there eats up the whole cartilage. And if you leave the patients and do not treat the rheumatoid arthritis, what you're going to get is this. So you can see that the entire cartilage has got destroyed. This is a severe case of rheumatoid arthritis that we're looking at. Young female, 35, 40-year-old female, not taking any rheumatoid arthritic treatment, and this is what happens to the knee, and these are the knee which we need to replace at an earlier age. These are the kind of deformities, very, very severe deformities that we get, and it affects the hip and the knee equally. I'm not going to go into medical management of rheumatoid arthritis. Now let's get on to the actual topic of joint replacement. Why you want to do a joint replacement? You know, there are only two things that the joint replacement is going to do. It's going to get you relief from pain, that's number one, and that's for what the patient has come to you for. And the other is to restore the function and mobility. So we have all our grandmothers, grandfathers who are there who are suffering from arthritis. They're not able to walk, they're not able to go to the washroom. And if you see, and they're severely arthritic, and if you try to give a joint replacement to them, this is what they're going to give, restore the function and mobility. So I will just get you through the implants, how they are and how they are being put. This is a total hip replacement which are there, and these are the different parts which are associated. This is the cup, this which is a polythene liner which sits into it, and this is the head which will get into the bone. So these are the different parts, and there are the different choice. You know, you have the patient always has a choice for the implant. We have two types of implants in hip replacement. One is a cemented, and the other is an uncemented. Generally, the cemented one is for very elderly patients, but sometimes in younger patients, we try to use an uncemented total hip replacement, which is now being almost a gold standard. Okay, so these are the uncemented. So the uncemented ones, we are not using the cement. If you see the previous slide, this is the stem, and besides that stem, you can see something white going on. So that's the cement which is used to fix this stem. Okay. Now, if you see the other slide, in this there is no cement which is there. It's just the stem. So the stem which is there is made to the level that it gets incorporated into the bone, and that's where it gets the stability from. Just a simple technique, what we try to do is there is an arthritic hip which is there, we get the head off, which is a pathological head, and after getting that head off, what we do is we prepare the socket. So it's a ball and joint, ball and socket type of a joint. So you see we have to prepare a socket and we have to prepare the ball. So this is the preparation for the socket. We are reaming it and making it spherical. Once it is made spherical, then this is the implant which we put inside, and it sits exactly into that cup. Similarly, what we did on the socket, then this is the ball which we need to put it back. So these are the broach which we put inside the bone, and once that broaching is done, we prepare a space for it, then we put that stem inside. And once that stem is inside, we put a head back into it and then reduce it, and that's a new joint, that's a new hip replacement which is there. So this is an artificial hip that we have done. These are the different kinds of implants that have been put, and still the gold standard today is ceramic on ceramic. So there is a ball and there is a socket. The ball and the socket are made up of ceramic, still stands the test of time and has lasted for more than 25-30 years now. And this is the best joint that you can think of and give, is a ceramic on ceramic total hip replacement. These are the different kinds of hip replacements. Now, as we were discussing, patients come to me, no, but after hip replacement, I'm not able to sit cross-legged on the floor. Try to give me something by which I can sit cross-legged on the floor. Yes, now we have implants by which, if we put these implants, patient can sit cross-legged on the floor, can do Olympics, can do whatever they want. This is a large head metal on metal hip replacement which is there, and if we do this, what we get is a near normal range of motion which is a pre-pathological state of the hip joint and can do wonders. Just demonstrating that bilateral hip replacements which is done, an uncemented total, this is a typical ankylosing spondylitis case which is there, and a bilateral hip replacement has been done under the patient. Just to add to it the different types of hip replacements, these are the new things which we are discussing. This is just to compare. This is a cement which is there. So there's a patient who came to me. There on one side we did the cemented, and on the other side we have